You know, several years ago, I did a video, and I'll try to link it here eventually down the line, where I talked about how it seems that between, America and other parts of the country, that Japan, when it comes to storytelling and mostly their animation, their anime, if you will, as well as the mangas, their essential version of novelization or trade paperbacks or comics, if you will, that they're not afraid to pull any punches. You know, whatever they feel is going to sell or get people's attention, they will move forward with it. They will attempt to give it an opportunity to shine. A prime example of this recently, over the past year or so, was interspecies reviewers. It was a unique concept, to say the least, and it definitely had the, I guess you could say it definitely had the stamina to become, and potential, I should say, to become a very popular anime and manga. Unfortunately, what it didn't let anybody know at Funimation, or even those in Japan themselves, was interspecies reviewers was essentially a hentai. Yeah, it was essentially a hentai. Maybe not, a hentai among, the elite of hentais, if you will, like let's say Stainless Steel or anybody else, but it was a hentai, and this got it in trouble, and this basically got Funimation, Amazon, believe it or not, and even those in Japan to want to take it off the air because the people behind it basically didn't tell them the whole truth as to why interspecies reviewers was such a popular manga slash anime. Why people were behind it, why it was gaining a fan base. And I mean, the comedy and the humor and everything involved in it, the story somewhat, was part of it, but basically the concept, of how these people were reviewers or portrayed as reviewers was definitely something nobody expected them to go in the direction of. But yeah, it's it shows like interspecies reviewers, mangas, animes like interspecies reviewers that are a good example of, like I said, Japan is not afraid to, at least some studios, if not most studios in Japan, are not afraid to, take it up a notch, if not by 100, but not by probably not. Well, what I'm trying to say is, interspecies reviewers is a prime example of Japan, unlike other parts of the world, not being afraid to take it up a notch, even by 100 times fold, if you will, or 10 times fold, 100 times fold. They're not afraid to do it. They're not afraid to really get risque and really get out of the box and all that, unlike other countries like here in the U.S. But they're not the only ones from a manga and an anime adaptation of that said manga to prove that. You see, one of the websites I go on, because I'm a fan of transformation, and they have this website dedicated to it, to all kinds of transformations and all kinds of, movies and shows, live action, animation, anime, you name it. I go to the site, and once in a while, when they get an opportunity, they will update the site, and on the front page, they will let you know once you scroll down what the newest editions are. Well, there were several new editions for the first update of 2022. One of them that stuck out was called Gelflin, or Gelflin. It's Gleifnir. Gelflin or whatever. It's Gelflin. I'll put it that way. Like I said, it's Glefnir. Gilflin. Or Gilfliner, or whatever. Gilfliner. And what Gilfliner is, it's somewhat of a more, I would say, kind of raunchy, kind of semi hentai like story with a horror twist. Yeah, it's like one of those adult animes that has, has a hint of hentai in it, or at least a hint. Yeah, it has a hint of hentai, thrown in there, as well as it has a hint of horror, depending on the scenes and the moments, and what the story what the story is focusing on for that episode. In Gelfliner, as it's called, Gelflinen. It's hard to say. Like I said, it's Glepnir. So Gelfliner, if you will, Gelfliner. Like I said, it's got a hint of that throat spewed without, from what I can tell. But what was interesting is the synopsis that this website, known for transformations, known as Shadow Lord, that's the website's name, gave for it. Basically saying it's any furry's wet dream come true. Because the plot of it is they take this ancient, legendary, I guess you could say, this ancient legendary lore, if you will, and they use it, like I said, in a comedic, in a very, comedic way at times. But like I say, it's a comedic action. It's kind of like an action comedy anime with a slight bit of hentai-ness thrown in, and a slight bit of horror. Because basically, one of the main characters, the male character, who's male, by the way, ends up having this curse put upon him. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or it's just something that somebody put on him because of whatever reasons. Like I said, I've not seen this entirely or read the manga. But basically, Gelfliner, if you will, its premise is this male character gets this curse, and whenever he, I guess, gets aggressive, or his temperature turns up or something, I don't know. Long story short, something happens to where, when he gets into a particular mood, if you will, that he will transform into a fursuit, into a living, breathing fursuit that can act on its own, if you will. The only exception is when it comes to like fighting, he needs help. He needs somebody to help him out. And that's where this one character, I think her name is Clara, I think, comes in. And she is basically like, I guess you could say she's an, how do I put this? She is a, how do I put this? She is an NFSW of a character. Yeah. She is an NFSW of a protagonist. That's basically what she is. It's like, she has this, basically she's a mistress protagonist, we'll put it that way. She's got that mistress feel to her. So she basically kind of has to, she basically, what she does is she takes the male protagonist, and basically because she knows and seen the secret, she's taking a picture of it, and it says, hey, I'll plaster this all over the wall unless you do what I tell you to do. Kind of bribing him, thus being a mistress protagonist. You know, she ends up kind of discovering, at least with his help, I think, that there's a zipper on his back. Yeah, so when he turns into this living, breathing fursuit, if you will, the addition that he has on the back is a zipper. So whoever pulls that zipper down can climb inside of him and be like, you know, a second operator, like when it comes to helping him fight and everything, which he apparently cannot do when he is just, you know, the suit. Like when he's just the fursuit, you know, he can move around. He can move around, you know, all right, but he can't fight. He can't be very agile and mobile like he would be if he was just human. It's like he can walk and everything, but it's like he can't really, you know, fight, a good fight. So she ends up discovering this thanks to him, and she decides, I'm gonna have some fun, and she climbs right inside of him, and she does this multiple times. Apparently in the manga and the anime, she climbs right inside of him. And the first time they do it, apparently, you could tell, like I said, it's very hentai inspired. Like it's a you see that semi hentai influence in there. You know, when she's climbing in and everything. And essentially, she realizes, I guess maybe she looked up the information, I don't know, that when anybody does this, they become one with that person. So in other words, she, when she climbs in and zips up the suit, or the suit zips up on its own, she becomes one with the male protagonist while he's in the fursuit form. And like I said, the way they make it done, the way they make her character going in there for the first time, as well as the second time, as well as another female character doing it, like I said, you could definitely tell that there's a definite inspiration of and hint of semi-hentai-ness thrown in there. You know, there's definitely a hint of that. And then there's one episode where basically the male character as a fursuit gets torn apart and fuses with one of the characters that was within him, and they kind of start losing themselves, like they don't know who they are or whatever. And the way that the Clara girl discovers this is she sees pieces of him all over the place, and then she sees this big, this person just lift up the head and everything. Well, they see this eyeball first popping out, and then they see one of the tattered pieces of the suit, just lift up, and you see this hollow eyes and mouth going, moaning and all that, or something with some hair on top. And again, that right there shows you that that kind of a scene, along with some other scenes later on, is inspired, has a little bit of inspiration of slight horridness. So, long story short, just like Interspecies Reviewers, Gleipnir, if you will, Gleipnir, definitely does not shy away from taking a step that no other anime or manga has taken. And it just shows you, again, that Japan is, along with some countries, but not most, is more willing to do things than the U.S. would. I mean, you would not see the U.S. do something like this in any other animation. So it's a family-friendly animation, adult animation, whatever the case may be. You would not see it. You would not see it because, no studio, whether or not the animation would be meant just for adults and everything and seen late at night, no studio would take a chance on it. Because It's so out there. It's so unusual and out there. But when you get down to it, it does show you exactly one how popular the furry community is. If they have, someone out of Japan, willingly, create a manga and an anime based on that manga, basically, you know, basically saying that, hey, this was inspired to an extent by the furry community's influence, around the world. It shows you that nothing, as I said before, is off limits. Nothing. Because again, like I said, if you have somebody that's willing to make a manga, and by extension an anime, based on somebody that gets turned into a fursuit, essentially into a mascot fursuit, that has the other protagonists, mistress protagonists as we call them, climb into them as if they're a costume, and essentially you could tell that this anime and manga is based off the popularity of the furry community around the world, and the impact that it's had. And like I said, it tells you that nothing, and I mean nothing, is off limits. Nothing nothing out there that they could think of, hey, this might be a good idea for a story, or for a future manga and eventual anime in the future. The thing is, nothing to them is off limits. Anything could be turned into a story. Anything could be turned, into a manga, into an anime. Good example, this candy cane here. They could look at all these candies in here and say, we could come up with a story for a manga and an eventual anime based on that. And guess what? They would think about it, and eventually they'd make it a reality. Guys, listen to me. Japan, the reason people have a lot of respect for Japan, despite our history with them, the reason people have a lot of respect for them is because they're willing to think outside the box. Creatively, they're willing to think outside the box. They are not, afraid to hold back, on anything. They're not afraid of, thinking about, doing something with one thing and then not doing it at all. If they feel, hey, this could sell a lot of money, this can make a lot of money for us through manga sales and anime sales and merchandise, they'll go through with it. They will. And when I see something like Gleipnir, if you will, being created with the potential that a second season could be on its way, who knows? And you could tell that it has its inspiration, that its creation was inspired, I should say, by the furry community. And the fact that you could tell that it's got some slight influence of, a slight influence of hentai and horror in it as well throughout. Again, it shows you nothing out there is off limits, to Japan or anybody. And that the only limitation you have is, or the only limitation you have when it comes to your creativity is your imagination. And your creativity the creativity you get from your imagination most of the time is unlimitless. And Japan realizes that. And that's why they take advantage of it to create this kind of stuff. Because, just because you think, hey, they're running out of original ideas here and there, that's when they hit you with something that you wouldn't expect. I mean, this is why I think when I look at a place like Japan, I would not be surprised if they took a story identical to, let's say, Mr. Internet Man's Mystic Makeover series, or maybe something similar to the Metamorphosized to Malleability series, by Michelle Jacques Lador, excuse me there. I would not be surprised if they, created a manga and an anime based, similar to those, and thus by extension make an anime similar to those, and those mangas and animes based on those similar stories and concepts would succeed and make money. Because again, like I said, nothing is off limits. Nothing, out there is beyond, a creative mind to do something with. So when I look at something, like I said, like Gleipnir, it's seen it's inspired by the furry community because the character turns into essentially a fursuit for the female protagonists or friends to, or allies that he could trust to climb into and merge with him or help him fight. And then on top of that, last year or year before, the interspecies reviewers and what they did there. Again, like I said, it shows that Japan's not afraid to pull punches. And it also shows that the only limitation you have around the world when it comes to creativity is your imagination. And your creative imagination is always unlimitless unless you do limit it. And that's never possible. But again, like I said, this is just proof here. If they're willing to do something like this with Gleipnir or Gleipnir, whatever it's called, and then, like I said, way before that with interspecies reviewers, it just shows you that, it just shows you that even the concepts of, inanimate transformation or fantasy, that, fantasy to, fantasy elements of being able to get it on, if you will, with certain fantasy characters because you want to rate them on how, good they are. It just shows you that nothing is off limits. Nothing is off limits, especially if you're Japan. If you're Japan, things are definitely not off limits. But yeah, I just wanted to come on here and kind of explain why this Gleipnir series is just another example that when you look at the difference between, creative ideas for original programming, original stories and comics and everything, that when it comes to the difference between Japan and America, that Japan is always, ready to crank something out that you would not expect them to crank out, to, especially if it's based on something you wouldn't think it would be, that, it would be based on. You wouldn't expect it whatsoever. And again, it shows you that, despite what it's based on, they're not afraid to pull any punches. They will basically be right in your face saying, boom, here you go, uncut, unfiltered, raw, if you will. But yeah, that's a big difference between, Japan and America and other parts of the world when you get down to it. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check me out at my Teespring store, check me out at BW Rose's Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations, except for Pandora. Also check me out at BW Roses on Vimeo. Check me out at patreon.com/BW Roses to support me with $1, $3 tier. I am working on a $5 one potentially, but I'm not too sure about that, so don't hold me to that. If I do it, I'll let you know. And also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. I'm sorry if I sounded like I was all over the place. It's late. It's about 1:51 in the morning on this Martin Luther King Day. But I just wanted to get this out of the way so you guys can have something to listen to throughout the day, watch, give your opinions on. But yeah, again, this is just another example of Japan stepping up and thinking outside the box and showing how much of a difference they are, animation and comic book wise, or as they call it, manga wise, when it comes to America and other parts of the world. But let me know what your thoughts are, and I am out.